From CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede, and later in the show I will speak to Mark Caputo, a longtime political reporter in Florida, about the Trump indictment and the impact on the presidential race. But we start with a new initiative to place the issue of abortion on the ballot in Florida during the 2024 election. As you know, the Florida legislature recently passed a 6-week abortion ban, and essentially that's an outright ban on abortion in Florida. A new group, the Florida Women's Freedom Coalition, is now collecting signatures to protect the health care rights of women by going back to the 24-week standard that was in effect for decades. This week I spoke to Anna Hochkammer, the Vice Mayor of Pinecrest and the Executive Director of the Florida Women's Freedom Coalition. I asked her about where we are as a nation 1 year after the Supreme Court overturned Roe.
I think on the ground across the 50 states, we're seeing a greater division than ever before. You have states that have gone to constitutionally guarantee the access to abortion. You have states that have basically enacted total prohibitions on abortion. That's despite the fact that national surveys demonstrate time and time again that between 65 and 75% of Americans want abortion to be accessible, safe, and legal. They understand that it's part of health care for every family, every woman and girl in the United States. So a year after the overturning of Roe, we find ourselves living in a country where your ability to access healthcare, your ability to access sometimes life-saving services depends very much on geography. And so we are experiencing a time where living in a certain city or a certain state can have life or death differential outcomes for individuals in America. That is a really disturbing place to be.
I recently spoke to Florida's former Surgeon General, Scott Rifkes, just about his experiences in Florida. And one of the things that he said worried him overall in the country was that we're developing a system, very much what you're just talking about, where there's red state healthcare and there's blue state healthcare, as opposed to just healthcare. And that can get very, very dangerous. And in the South, in particular, Florida for the longest time was a sort of a safe harbor, a safe venue, at least before, when it was around the 24-week mark. And now slowly it's been regressed down to 15 weeks and 6 weeks. So pick up on that. Let's talk about where this fight is now in Florida and the impact here in Florida.
Well, there's no question that the almost total prohibition on access to abortion in the band of southern states just to the north of Florida has been felt inside the state of Florida, because we've seen over 5 figures increase in the number of abortions performed in the state of Florida since Roe was overturned. It means that people are traveling here from the region in order to get the health care that they need. There's absolutely no question that that's happening. What the consequences of the 6-week ban, which was signed into law earlier this year in Florida, was that safe haven, it disappears in this region of the United States. And at that point, we're talking about really long distances and expensive trips to fly to other parts of the nation in order to get that type of healthcare services. Now, like most of these issues, you have, red state and blue state, but you also have rich and poor. And there are segments of the country who can easily get on a plane and fly wherever they need to go and pay out of pocket for whatever services they need. They're going to be fine. But for most Americans and for most Floridians, it's not an easy lift to buy a plane ticket, to fly somewhere, to pay for a hotel, to pay for services with a doctor or a clinic you don't know, to have to recover from whatever medical need you've just had addressed, and then get yourself home while you're working, while you're raising other children, while you're taking care of other family members. So the consequences of this little change in healthcare policy will be felt in every single family across the state sooner or later, and probably sooner.
Well, let's be real clear, just so folks understand. We were at roughly 24 weeks. Then the legislature a year ago took it to 15. And then this last session took it to 6. But explain why the 6-week ban isn't in effect yet. Explain to me how this is going to work, because right now the law in Florida is 15 weeks while it's under review by the state Supreme Court.
Correct.
But pick it up from there.
The 15-week abortion ban was challenged by several groups in several different lawsuits, one of which was a challenge based on a religious freedom principle. That challenge to the 15-week ban is set to be heard by the Florida Supreme Court. They're either going to evaluate the 15-week ban and announce that it complies with the Florida Constitution, or they're going to reject it. The way the 6-week ban was written, it doesn't go into effect until the 15-week ban case is heard by the Florida Supreme Court and passes scrutiny of the court. So the minute the 15-week ban is signed off on by the Florida Supreme Court, it will become a 6-week ban, a de facto total ban on abortion in Florida.
Explain why you believe that's a total ban in Florida.
Listen, we use terms like weeks and months and viability all the time in pregnancy, but pregnancy and childbirth is a very gray area. The way you count pregnancy by weeks actually contains the first 2 weeks when you're not pregnant at all, because the only date that we're able to benchmark in a woman's reproductive cycle is the date that her last menstrual cycle began. Conception then happens actually 2 weeks or so after that. So by the time you're 4 weeks pregnant, you've actually only been carrying an embryo for 2 weeks. When you're 6 weeks pregnant, at the most, you actually have an embryo that's been gestating for 4 weeks. Most women at that point have no idea they're pregnant. They're still simply a little bit late on their period. In fact, most pregnancy tests can't detect pregnancy that early. So the idea that there is any window with which to seek care, with which to seek a termination in a 6-week ban environment is really, it's a false flag. It's a total ban when you put it into practice.
All right, so now you're part of a group that is working towards getting something on the ballot in 2024. Talk to me about that.
There's a really broad coalition of groups. Some of them come out of the reproductive health care movement. Some of them come out of the civil rights movement. Some of them are just groups of Floridians who are not ideological, but who understand that access to abortion is really important for the health and safety of women and their families here in Florida. So an initiative started. There's a petition circulating all over the state, very simple, straightforward language saying that the Florida legislature can't prohibit or penalize access to abortion before a viability or when it's necessary to protect a patient's health as determined by that patient's healthcare provider. It doesn't take away the legislature's capacity to require that notice be given to parents or guardians if a minor is seeking treatment. None of that. It's a very straightforward, simple language, nothing complicated. We need to get about 900,000 valid petitions signed from every corner of the state of Florida by December 31st, 2023, so that it can all be scrutinized and approved and ready to go on the November 2024 ballot, when we know that because it's a presidential year and because I think there'll be a lot of attention on Florida, we should have some tremendous turnout and see the will of the Floridian voter really register on that down ballot petition.
And Florida hasn't been alone in this. Kansas did this very similar thing, and voters in Kansas, which is a red state, came out in support of reproductive rights and in support of abortion. So I think, Florida, I think every poll I've seen shows that Floridians support a woman's right to be able to govern her own body. And yet the legislature passed this 6-week ban. Square that for me. Reconcile the fact that the legislature reacted and the governor is pushing one thing when all polling suggests that the people of Florida have a very different view.
Well, I agree. I think you're right. There's no question. 75% of Floridians reject the 6-week ban. The language that's in this petition, guaranteeing access to abortion, gets a 70% approval by Floridians in every poll that we've been able to run. It polls at over 60% approval with Republicans. It polls at about 57% approval, even with Trump voters. Florida is a state where access to safe and legal abortion is a general issue of consensus and unity. It doesn't matter where we stand on other issues or where we stand in a partisan scenario or ideologically. Now, I can't project myself into the Florida legislature's minds. I can't project myself into the governor's mind. I can assume that there is some strategy which doesn't necessarily involve representing the interests, preferences, and policy positions of actual Floridians and actual Florida voters. We are the fourth largest state. We have about 4 million women living here who are of reproductive age. And let's not forget, those women are parts of families. They're our children, our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, our friends. That means every single Floridian family is being disserved by the repeated initiatives to cut off access to what is fundamentally basic, important health care, which may be necessary in every family's life at some point or another. And so I encourage everyone who can to chip in to make sure that we can protect the health and well-being of women and girls across the state. Talk about this issue with your friends and your family. You would be surprised at how many people from different walks of life have had experiences with it and understand why it's important for the health, well-being, safety of Florida women and girls to have access to safe and legal abortion.
If you want to learn more about what they are doing, you can go to their website at FloridaWomen'sFreedomCoalition.com. Now, when we come back, we talk about Trump's Miami court appearance, his visit to Versailles, and the entry of Miami Mayor Francis Suarez into the Republican primary. Ooh, it's so exciting. Stay with us.